Yeah, when you go.
Welcome to Casual Politics. Sir Nicholas, thank you very much for accepting my request.
Well, thank you for coming to see me.
And I'm very grateful to you for it. You need no introduction. You've been Member of Parliament since 1983.
That's right.
More than 32 years.
It's a very, very long time. It seems like a lifetime.
Very long time.
Yeah.
And you've been also Minister of State for Armed Forces.
Yeah.
From 94 to 97
Yeah.
under John Major. So my first question is, how did you get involved into politics?
Well, my grandfather was a Member of Parliament. My
For
father
60
was a member for 50 years, 60 years. And my grandfather was a Member of Parliament for 64 years and 360 days. My father was a Member of Parliament for 25 years. And I think you sort of it's rather like, a lot of sons of doctors become doctors, a lot of sons and daughters and scientists. And I think if it's in your blood and it's around you and it interests you, which it always has done, and excites you, which it always has done, not politics, but the public life has excited me. I think the chance to become a Member of Parliament is a great honour, and I take it very seriously, and I don't view it with the same cynical view as most people do. I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to do, and I do it because it's an honour to be a public servant in this country. My siblings went and did other things, and they love that. So I think you must do whatever you think is best.
And did you ever wanted to challenge your grandfather and to be Member of Parliament more than he was at this time?
No, because you couldn't begin to, and I live in this permanent shadow, and a benevolent and loving shadow. But he was a giant amongst men, and I'm a very long-serving, but I'm not in anywhere approaching his league. But I have loved very much being in a place and being part of a place that has such tremendous connections to him.
Just a question before coming to your career in Parliament and your grandfather, because he passed away exactly 50 years ago, and some people they say that he was a great warrior. He won the war for this country, but he was not a very good prime minister because people didn't want him anymore in 1945.
Well, I think it was a different. I think Britain was war weary. Rather like Britain is rather war weary now. They're not anxious to go off on any military expeditions. I think in 1945 people wanted to come home. I think they liked the sound of the Labour blandishments of more houses, and they thought that Mr. Attlee would bring them home quicker, and that my grandfather, actually a lot of them thought that Mr. Attlee would sort of be head of the government, but my grandfather would remain Prime Minister. That's the truth. But he went, and he went with a good grace, of course, because that's the will of the people, and he recuperated for 3 or 4 years, and he came back again. It wasn't that he wasn't a good Prime Minister, it was just that he was a brilliant war Prime Minister, and I think people took the view that they wanted to have someone different to lead them in peacetime. Well, they very soon decided that was the wrong decision. In 1951 they re-elected him again.
And now your career in Parliament since 1983, why didn't it took you 11 years to get a ministerial job?
Well, because I didn't really see eye to eye with Mrs. T, and much as I admired her and revered her, and I do, and I think she was a remarkable, extraordinary, gifted Prime Minister, there was a lot that was going on that I wasn't really I wasn't a fully paid up Thatcherite. On the other hand, I was a fully paid up Thatcherite to this end, that I was very conscious of the fact that I won Crawley, a largely working class seat with a big majority, because they all love Mrs. T. And so of course I acknowledge her greatness, but there was also, I wasn't very happy with Britain having very, very high levels of unemployment, very high levels of unemployment. I thought it was socially divisive, and I come from the One Nation end of the Tory party, so, whilst I acknowledge all her greatness and her skill as a Prime Minister, I also thought John Major was a very good Prime Minister, and he came from a different cut of cloth altogether.
But not pragmatic enough.
Well, I think he was absolutely marvellous, John, personally. I think you will find that history will be very, very much kinder to John Major's time as Prime Minister than his contemporaries were and the newspapers were at the time he was Prime Minister.
And how was it like to work with John Major when you were in the Ministry of Defence?
What was it?
What was it like to work
Well,
with
he was a wonderful man to work
John
for,
Major.
John. He was a tremendously...
Yes.
He was a wonderful Prime Minister. He was a very good manager of people, actually. And his view was, frankly, that if his ministers knew what they were doing and were good, he let them get on and do it, if he assumed that you knew what you were doing. And I was very lucky in the Ministry of Defence to serve with Malcolm Rifkind, who went on from there to be Foreign Secretary, and then under Michael Portillo, which was really a wonderful time. I loved working for Michael, and he was a brilliant Secretary of State. And we had a really interesting time. We were tackling some very difficult stuff, but you're always tackling difficult stuff at Defence, as you can see in the last few years.
And when New Labour they came into government, you opposed the minimum wage. So have you changed your mind?
Oh yeah, no, I
since
did
then?
change my mind, and I think it was a great mistake on my part to oppose it. I think it was a foolish thing, and you make some bad calls in 30 years of politics, and that was a bad call on my part. And I'm very glad that we have the minimum wage. And actually, I'm a big supporter of what is called the living wage. I mean, I think we need to look very carefully. One of the things the Prime Minister said today at the Institute of Directors conference today, that I think we do have to see that people do take a share in the improved circumstances of our country and the improved circumstances of commerce and business.
And do you think that the government has tackled this issue very seriously since 2010?
Yes, I think they have. But you do it in different ways by taking people out of tax, which they've done to an enormous number of very poorly paid people. They have already made their circumstances much better.
But living standards, they're still very low.
Well, living standards aren't very low, but they are getting better, slower than we would like. And I think that's part of the situation around the world. It isn't just this country's made a very startling recovery and has done very, very well and is doing very well and generating very, very big, throwing out a lot of new jobs. But the fact is that a lot of our great markets, like the European Union, one of our biggest markets, are going through a very hard time.
And a few days ago, George Osborne, Chancellor of Exchequer, he announced his pensions bonds and a boost. It was a boost for pensioners. But don't you think that those people who have got money enough, that the government should, rather than them, now help those who haven't got enough money to survive, like students?
Well, look, let's separate the argument out. It's a perfectly fair point you're making. And my answer to you is this, that pensioners are not all very well off. A lot of pensioners are not at all well off.
Better off than the students.
They may be, but they've worked all their lives. They've paid in all their lives. And they have these are people who've spent a lot of money and time saving. And the interest rates have been so bad for the last few years that a lot of them find themselves not nearly as well off as they had a right to be, or their right to expect to be. And so I think it's a sensible step. I mean, I would like to see everyone better off. And that will come if our economy grows, if enough people go into industry and commerce and engineering and science and all the rest of it, and we grow this country. A much more productive country is a much more wealthy country, and a much more wealthy country raises all boats. It just does.
And is it not because the pensioners, they vote more in the elections than
they
students?
probably do. I don't think you need to be too cynical about it. You can be quite cynical about it. That I heard the Chancellor defend his thing very well the other day on what he did, and I actually happen to agree with him. But I would like to see students better off too. I'd like to see everyone better off. But you can't do that on a very limited economy.
So how could you see students better off then?
Well, I think first of all, I think students have to pay for their education. I think that is, towards their student loans and all the rest of it.
So increasing tuition fees?
No, I think it was the right thing to do.
Oh, was it?
Well, I realise it left a lot of people in difficulty, but it hasn't affected the number of students, and I think as I said, a country that increases its natural wealth, increases its productivity, and we've got a long way to go on that, you know, will inevitably enable students to be better off. But I just say this to you, of the students that I know and that I see in my constituency, you know, a lot of them sweat through university and their parents help them where they can and all that. But at the end of the day, a lot of them are getting really good jobs. Really good jobs. And some of them find difficulty getting jobs, but that's life.
And some of them, they don't get the
Well,
job
that's
at all.
you know, I'm sorry they don't get jobs, but that's life.
Yes. And how can the government engage more with the students that, because now they've been complaining that the students, they don't vote and they don't engage with elections as they should have done.
Well, I don't think anyone complains about it. I mean, the losers are the students. I think that if you are a grown-up human being, if you're grown up enough to go to university, if you're grown up enough to respect what your parents have done to help you to get there, then I think it's pretty foolish not to vote. And I think it's foolish not to have a say in the way your country goes and to make a terrible row about it when your favoured candidate isn't elected. That is the way life works. And just to cop out because, you know, we don't know anybody, we can't vote, we're not engaged in it, it's pathetic, really. I mean, get engaged, take part. I mean, are you so casual that you don't take part?
No, of course. But for example, the Scottish referendum, students, they took part. Why now for the elections they're not as excited as they were
in the Scottish referendum? Well, I think the Scottish referendum was a very, very particular thing in a small country where everyone was swept up in it. I would love to see that happen at a general election. Of course I would. I mean, I want to see students taking part, but I can't make them take part.
But why? We can't have a sensible debate as we have.
But we can have a sensible debate, and a lot of politicians go to universities and get shouted at. You know, it's not sensible debate. I mean, I very much welcome the opportunity to debate with students about anything. I mean, I don't necessarily even want to debate. I'm very happy talking to you. I don't think I'd have a television camera here. There's lots to talk about. There's lots that the government have done that is not perfect. We've got a long way to go. Everyone knows that, you know, it's going to be hard pounding. We're in very, very tricky waters. It's not just money. If you look overseas, I mean, in Iran, very serious difficulties, Syria. I was a soldier for nearly 10 years. And I mean, you know, the Cold War was still going on when I was in the army. Well, I look at it now, and the Cold War has started again. And, you know, students have a big role in understanding all this, and not just to protest, but to take part and to consider and let their voice be heard, because they do have a voice, but they don't really ever show it very much.
And we're talking about young people. A few days ago, Prince Charles, your long-time friend, expressed his worries about radicalisation of young people. So do you share any sympathy with his views?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a very, very serious problem for this country. I think a lot of people in the Muslim population are deeply distressed by it and very anxious about it, don't really know what to do about it, and would almost prefer to turn the other way, but it's happening. And we have to do our very best to sort that out.
How could
well, I don't know how you prevent it. You know, if we knew how to prevent it, we'd all be living a quieter and more reasonable life. It's very tricky and very difficult, and you know, I think a lot of it depends on education, on families keeping the message straight that this is a absolutely defeatist, appalling version of Islam, which these people buy, which has no meaning to real Islam at all. So, you know, and I was very interested in that the BBC rushed around trying desperately to find someone outside all the mosques to disagree with Prince Charles, and they couldn't. All the people coming out there said, I think he's right, and I think it is serious, it is right. So I think that's right, but it's not all the Muslims' fault. It's not, you know, we live in this country, all of us together, and we have to find a way to make all that work. And you know, I regard all this as an aberration, and I think it will work, but I think not before we've had some more big trouble.
And do you think that multiculturalism has failed, particularly in this country?
Multiculturalism has what?
Failed.
No, I don't think it's failed, but I think multiculturalism was always a very fragile concept. And I think if you're going to have all these cultures living together, you have to have some very clear views, which is that if you want to come here, you know, you have to accept that this is the way that this country works. And if you want to live here, well, then you have to abide by those rules. So, you know, I think we've not done enough on that. And I think a lot of people have kind of toadied to the sort of anti-racist sort of concept, when what you need is some leadership, some authority, and some clear thinking.
And now on the EU referendum, why did you voted against the government's bill?
Because I am a
Do you think that
loyal,
it's a sham?
convinced.
Do you think that it's a sham, the referendum set for 2017?
Do I think what?
That it's a sham.
No, I don't think it's a sham. I mean, I think that's what the government have decided that they have to do. And actually, I think it's right. I'm a committed and convinced pro-European. I always have been. But I think the government are right to have a referendum after a renegotiation, because there's no doubt that there are things that quite clearly need to be renegotiated.
So why did you voted against it then?
No, I voted against having a referendum in the first place, because I thought the terms on which it was being done were wrong. But I am absolutely accept the fact that it's going to happen, and I shall campaign very vigorously for Britain to stay as a member of the European Union.
And do you think that how could we convince people to vote to stay within the EU?
Well, if I was a young person in Britain now, I would look around the world and say, is this a good moment to come out and leave us alone in the world? Would I think it's a good idea to leave the enfolding arms of the biggest single market in the world, with all that opportunity for travel and work in all those countries? I don't think I would, really. And I think the young people will vote. I hope they will.
And Germany has become very powerful. Do you think that, is it worrying that...
No, I think Germany is very powerful, and I think she's a very well-run, pacifist country. She really, you know, I tried to get, when I was a defence minister, I tried to get the Germans to help us in Bosnia. And I wanted them to let us borrow some of their tornadoes, and they wouldn't let us. Because they thought that would be the bombing of mainland Europe was too soon. And they were right, and they provided the best field hospital we've ever seen. So, you know, I don't think Germany is warlike at all, no, but I think she's economically hugely powerful. And because Britain has always been sort of on the verges of Europe and always sort of pulling back and never really being a wholehearted supporter, frankly, we could have run the whole of the European Union with the Germans and the French without batting an eyelid. But as we've always been so afraid of, you know, being wholehearted players, we've done rather badly on that front.
And conservative backbenchers are split over Europe. So do you think it's going to cost David Cameron's premiership, as it did for John Major?
No, I don't think it'll cost him his premiership, but I think the renegotiation that he's going to do is going to be much more substantial and successful than people think it will be. So no, I don't think it will. But the Tory party have big disagreements in its ranks about Europe. But I don't look at the membership of my Conservative Association as being the overall arbiters of whether or not it's right or wrong for Britain to stay in the European Union. I'm going to exercise my own judgment as a Member of Parliament, the fact that my country and its people really badly need to be part of a reformed European Union.
And what do you make of the government's proposal on English MPs on English votes?
Well, it's a very complicated and difficult situation. William Hague has put forward this plan. I'm still studying it, actually. I haven't really made up my mind yet. But I think, you know, you who follow these things very carefully will be aware that we've never had this situation in Britain before. What is going to happen in Scotland is, I have no idea what's going to happen in Scotland. You don't know, I don't know. But it's clear that we've had a referendum, they voted no. Now they could win a lot of seats in the general election. There are Scottish elections next year for the Scottish Assembly. You know, it's almost impossible to see how one's going to work one's way through all this. And you're going to have to take everyone with you. So it's another reason for everyone concentrating hard on what's happening.
And now polls show that actually none of the parties, they can win a majority. So why are you still optimistic that the Conservatives can win a landslide majority?
No, I absolutely don't think we can win a landslide majority. And if you find anyone who says that, they certainly ought to be put into a lunatic asylum. I mean,
the Prime Minister.
It's too. No, he doesn't think we're going to win with a landslide majority. He thinks we're going to win with a working majority, and I agree with him. You know, we won with a landslide majority in 1983.
Even in 1992.
1992. We did well, but not as big as 83.
But you didn't have the
But-
UKIP threat.
No,
then.
UKIP is UKIP. You know, I mean, really. But I mean, I really do think that if people who are interested in the future of their families, of their country, and of themselves are going to go to the ballot box and say to themselves, would I rather have Nigel Farage than David Cameron as the Prime Minister of this country? I don't think you have to go very far to answer the question. So I think people have to be very serious about this. And so I think we will end up, to answer your original question, with a working majority. I really firmly believe that, but I think there's a long way to go. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and it's going to be a very tough campaign.
So then why David Cameron is strongly scared to participate in those TV debates with Nigel Farage?
Well, I don't think he's scared to participate. He's just, you know, I mean, I think it's a tremendous ball to make the general election, all the build-up to the sort of, it's what the press love, the sort of gladiatorial, it's sort of Prime Minister's Question Time with 4 people. That's all they want. They want a tremendous punch-up on the telly because it's good entertainment. That's, you know, I'm against that. And I think if the Prime Minister can find a way of doing it, well, that's fine by me. But at the end of the day, you know, what matters is getting out in your constituency. We're all, you know, this is why the House of Commons works. We're all going to go back to our constituency, 640 or whatever it is, all over the country, from Land's End to John O'Groats, to campaign, take the message to our people and ask them what they want to do.
And my last question is, what will you do after 2015 general election?
Have a very, very big drink.
Thank you.
Very nice to see you. Thank you. Very nice to see you. Very nice. I enjoyed you. Very well informed you are. Too well informed.
Thank you very much.